The Eurasian steppe during the Pleistocene was a landscape that seemed designed specifically for creatures like Elasmotherium. Vast open grasslands stretched for thousands of miles, interrupted only by, to imagine a creature built like a living battering ram, thriving in a landscape of occasional river valleys and scattered woodlands. It truly was paradise for them. No dense forests, no steep terrain, just endless territory where speed, power, and intimidation ruled. What makes Elasmotherium's dominance truly remarkable is that they weren't just surviving, but thriving in areas where other megafauna couldn't establish permanent populations. The frozen steppes of Siberia, the wind-swept plains of Kazakhstan, the harsh grasslands of Central Asia, these were Elasmotherium's hunting grounds. These were territories where extreme cold, sparse vegetation and brutal competition eliminated most other large herbivores. The secret, I believe, lay in their approach to resource management. While mammoth herds required vast areas to support their numbers, constantly moving to find sufficient food, Elasmotherium operated on a different principle entirely. They were territorial specialists, claiming specific ranges and defending them with an aggressive efficiency that made migration unnecessary. That horn wasn't just a weapon, it was a property deed written in bone and enforced through violence. Consider the advantages this gave them during the harshest periods of the Ice Age. When food became scarce and competition intensified, mammoth herds had to keep moving, constantly searching for new feeding grounds while burning precious calories. Elasmotherium simply cleared their territory of competitors and settled in for the long haul. They could access buried vegetation that other creatures couldn't reach, defend prime feeding areas that others couldn't claim, and maintain energy reserves that migration-dependent species couldn't match. The fossil record tells a story of creatures that weren't just surviving, they were prospering. Elasmotherium remains have been found across a range that stretched from Ukraine to Mongolia, a distribution that suggests not desperate wandering, but successful territorial expansion. These weren't refugees from climate change. They were the landlords of the Ice Age, collecting rent in the form of exclusive access to the best grazing areas. And unlike mammoth populations, which fluctuated dramatically with environmental changes, Elasmotherium populations remained relatively stable throughout their existence. This wasn't luck. It was the natural result of a survival strategy so effective that it made them nearly immune to the environmental press that devastated other megafauna. For a creature so perfectly adapted to Ice Age conditions, so dominant in its chosen environment, and so well equipped for survival, Elasmotherium's extinction presents one of paleontology's most perplexing mysteries. How do you eliminate something that appeared virtually indestructible? While mammoths managed to survive in various forms until roughly 4,000 years ago, with some populations persisting on isolated islands well into human civilization, Elasmotherium vanished from the fossil record around 39,000 years ago. This wasn't a gradual decline. It was a sudden, complete disappearance that left no descendants and precious few clues about what could have overwhelmed such a formidable creature. The conventional explanation points to climate change, but this theory has some serious problems. Elasmotherium had already survived multiple ice ages, numerous warming periods, and dramatic environmental shifts throughout its history. These were creatures that had proven themselves capable of adapting to changing conditions over millions of years. Why would this particular climate shift prove fatal when so many previous ones had been survived? Some researchers suggest human hunting prey, but again, the evidence doesn't quite add up. While humans were certainly present in Elasmotherium's range during the late Pleistocene, the idea that early human populations could have systematically eliminated creatures this large and dangerous seems optimistic at best. Remember, we're talking about 5-ton animals armed with 6-foot horns and the temperament of a cornered badger. Even with primitive weapons, the cost-benefit analysis of hunting such creatures seems questionable. The most disturbing possibility is that Elasmotherium's very dominance contributed to its downfall. Their territorial nature, while advantageous during stable periods, may have prevented them from adapting to rapidly changing conditions. Unlike mammoths, which could migrate to more favorable areas, Elasmotherium populations may have been too committed to their territories to abandon them when conditions deteriorated. But here's the truly unsettling part. The disappearance was so complete that for centuries, scientists weren't even Elasmotherium had existed at all. Unlike mammoth remains, which are found regularly and in excellent condition, Elasmotherium fossils are rare and often fragmentary. It's almost as if something deliberately erased them from the archaeological record. Recent discoveries have added new layers to this mystery. Some fossils show evidence of stress markers and nutritional deficiencies that suggest the final populations were struggling with environmental press. Others display unusual growth patterns that might indicate disease or genetic problems. The picture emerging is of a species that didn't just disappear. It collapsed suddenly and catastrophically. Taken together, the evidence paints a grim picture. Whatever eliminated Elasmotherium was powerful enough to bring down a creature that had reigned unchallenged for ages, resilient, dominant, and built to endure. And yet, it vanished with barely a trace. For an animal that once defined the Ice Age landscape, the silence surrounding its extinction is genuinely haunting. The mammoth survival story, impressive as it is, suddenly seems less like triumph and more like luck. They weren't necessarily better adapted. Perhaps they were just more fortunate. Elasmotherium. It wasn't just another Ice Age animal. I think of it as the pinnacle of prehistoric power, a creature so finely tuned to its environment that it redefined what dominance looked like. The mammoth may have gotten the fame, but Elasmotherium earned the title that mattered most, the real titan of the Ice Age. But Elasmotherium wasn't the only behemoth history forgot. While it ruled the frozen steppes, another titan far to the south was the definition of giant altogether, bigger than a mammoth, heavier than a T-Rex, and possibly the largest land mammal to ever walk the earth. When we envision the world that shaped our earliest ancestors, I typically imagine a landscape dominated by predators. Saber-toothed cats stalking the savanna, massive hyenas lurking near waterholes, and early humans huddled around fires for protection. But what if one of the most significant competitors our ancestors faced wasn't a carnivore at all, but another primate? One so massive it would tower over any human alive today. Meet Dinopithecus enans, the terrible ape of Pleistocene Africa. Standing over 1.5 meters or around 5 feet tall when upright and weighing up to 150 kilograms or 330 pounds, it was nearly 5 times heavier than today's largest baboons. These colossal primates shared the African landscape with Australopithecus, an early Homo species, between roughly 3 to 2 million years ago. Yet despite their imposing presence during this pivotal chapter of prehistory, they remain virtually unknown outside of specialized scientific circles. Dinopithecus belongs to the family Cercopithecidae, the Old World monkeys, rather than the hominid family. Specifically, it's classified within the subfamily Papionini, alongside modern baboons, geladas, and mangabeys. Despite this taxonomic distance from humans, Dinopithecus represents one of the most remarkable examples of primate gigantism in the fossil record. The genus first entered scientific literature in 1938 when paleontologist Robert Broom described Dinopithecus ingens based on fossil remains from Sterkfontein, near Pretoria, South Africa. The name itself tells a story. Dino, from the Greek for terrible or fearfully great. Pithecus, meaning ape or monkey, and ingens, meaning huge in Latin. A fitting title for a creature that pushed the boundaries of what we thought primates could become. Subsequent discoveries have primarily come from cave sites in South Africa, including Kromdraai and Cooper's Cave, locations famously associated with early hominin remains. Fossil evidence includes partial skulls, mandibles, and postcranial elements that allow paleontologists to reconstruct its appearance and lifestyle. Most fossils date between 3 and 2 million years ago, placing Dinopithecus firmly in the Pliocene epoch alongside early Australopithecus and Homo species. Physically, Dinopithecus was a scaled-up baboon built for terrestrial power. Its skull alone measured up to 30 centimeters in males and featured an elongated muzzle, enlarged canines, and a prominent sagittal crest for anchoring massive jaw muscles, indicators of both feeding strength and male-male competition. The mandible was exceptionally robust, with a deep body adapted to handle powerful chewing forces far beyond what is seen in modern baboons. Dental analysis shows a heavy emphasis on grinding plant material. Large molars with thick enamel point to a diet that included fibrous vegetation, seeds, and tubers, foods that required prolonged mastication. These adaptations suggest Dinopithecus could exploit tough resources that smaller primates couldn't process efficiently, offering a survival edge in diverse or fluctuating environments. Still, for all that chewing power, it needed a body that could carry the weight, literally. Though fossilized postcranial remains are fragmentary, they leave no doubt. This was a ground dweller built like a fortress. The bones are dense, the muscle attachments oversized, and the proportions suggest a primate that moved low and heavy. It wasn't agile, but it didn't need to be. It was stable, durable, a four-limbed tank that could traverse both woodland and savanna. Now, here's where the social structure gets fascinating. Sexual dimorphism in Dinopithecus was extreme, even more pronounced than in modern baboons. Males may have weighed up to twice as much as females and bore significantly larger canines and cranial crests. This suggests intense male competition, likely involving physical confrontations and dominance displays, a social structure where size directly translated to reproductive success. Yet all this leaves Dinopithecus somewhere in the middle of its ecosystem. Its size positioned it as a mesopredator, both hunter and hunted. It likely fed on fruits, seeds, roots, and small animals, while remaining vulnerable to apex predators like saber-toothed cats or large hyenas. Its bulk, strength, and potential for aggressive defense would have made it a formidable opponent, one that early hominins may have respected, avoided, or even competed with. Modern baboons are notoriously territorial, confrontational, and quick to violence when threatened. And Dinopithecus almost certainly took that to the extreme. With large, dominant males leading the charge, a threatened troop could have erupted into an explosion of noise, displays, and physical retaliation. Raised hackles, deafening vocalizations, and jaw-clapping would have been the first warning. But if that didn't work, those massive canines weren't just for show. A provoked Dinopithecus, especially a protective male, could have delivered devastating bites and powerful strikes capable of injuring or killing mid-sized predators. Some paleontologists estimate Dinopithecus could have delivered bite forces comparable to those of big cats, perhaps reaching or even exceeding 2,000 pounds of crushing force. I sometimes wonder what it must have been like to witness the very crucible of humanity. To stand in the presence of early Homo as upright walking became established, brain sizes grew, and the first stone tools appeared. Dinopithecus was there. That extinct primate, with its incredible size and strength, must have been an intimidating presence, more than enough to crush bone or tear through muscle, and they likely lived in social groups, meaning confrontation didn't just mean facing one, but facing many. Imagine a defensive circle of 10 to 20 large-bodied primates, all bristling with muscle. That would have been a serious deterrent to even large carnivores, or for that matter, early hominins. This wasn't a creature that backed down easily. It didn't need to. During the Pleistocene era, when Dinopithecus thrived, South Africa was undergoing significant climatic shifts. For a primate of its exceptional size, these changes brought both unique challenges and new opportunities. Forests were gradually giving way to more open woodlands and grasslands, a transition that favored adaptable, ground-dwelling species. Fossil sites where Dinopithecus remains have been found suggest it inhabited a mosaic landscape of open savanna interspersed with woodlands and riverine forests, environments not unlike those preferred by modern baboons. Troop life in Dinopithecus likely mirrored that of modern baboons, but on a far more intimidating scale. These multi-male, multi-female groups were probably structured around rigid dominance hierarchies, with adult males asserting their rank through visual displays and, when necessary, brutal, physical confrontations. With some males weighing up to 150 kilos, these clashes were anything but subtle. Adult males likely positioned themselves on the outskirts of the troop, forming a living barrier against potential predators. At dawn, the group would descend from cliffs or tall trees, safe havens used to avoid nocturnal hunters. From there, the day began with movement and lots of eating. Feeding likely consumed much of the daylight hours. Adult males may have needed up to 7 kilos of plant matter daily. Grasses, seeds, fruits, bulbs, tubers, all requiring tremendous chewing power. And while plants formed the base of their diet, they weren't strictly herbivores. Like their modern relatives, Dinopithecus likely supplemented with animal protein, small vertebrates, insects, scavenged carcasses. But here's the twist. With their size and strength, they may have taken things further. Juvenile antelope or the young of larger prey animals weren't out of the question. And when it came to disputed carcasses, their bulk alone may have been enough to intimidate other predators into backing off. Much like modern papionins, Dinopithecus likely relied on a rich set of vocalizations, facial cues, body postures, and physical contact. With brains scaled to their size and complex social structures to manage, their interactions were probably just as nuanced, broadcasting everything from individual rank to predator warnings with a glance or a grunt. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Dinopithecus is its temporal and geographic overlap with early human species. Between approximately 3 and 2 million years ago, as Dinopithecus roamed the South African landscape, the hominin presence was undergoing a period of remarkable change. Species like Australopithecus were being joined by early Homo. The fossil evidence places Dinopithecus in close association with hominin remains at several critical sites. At Swartkrans and Cooper's Cave in South Africa's Cradle of Humankind, Dinopithecus fossils have been found in the same deposits as Australopithecus robustus and early Homo specimens. This wasn't just proximity across a landscape. These primates inhabited the same immediate environments, drank from the same water sources, sheltered in the same cave systems, and likely observed each other regularly. The size disparity alone would have created a power imbalance. Early hominins stood approximately 1.2 to 1.5 meters tall and weighed between 30 to 55 kilos. They would have been significantly outmatched by adult male Dinopithecus, which averaged around 80 kilos, with larger individuals reaching up to 150 kilos. Armed with formidable canines and superior upper body strength, even the smaller female Dinopithecus would have presented a physical threat. Competition for resources was inevitable. Both groups were omnivorous, with overlapping dietary preferences, though with different specializations. Early hominins were developing adaptations for a more versatile diet, including meat obtained through scavenging and possibly hunting, while Dinopithecus likely specialized in efficiently processing large quantities of plant materials. Nevertheless, both would have sought out the same high-value food resources, fruits, nuts, tubers, and water sources, creating potential conflict points. And it wasn't just diet that brought them into contact. Both groups favored mosaic environments, offering a mix of woodlands for shelter and open areas for foraging. Both likely needed trees or cliff faces for nighttime safety from predators. Both would have been drawn to reliable water sources, particularly during dry seasons. This shared preference for similar habitats would have end regular encounters between the species. The responses of early hominins to Dinopithecus were likely complex and situational. Direct competition was probably avoided when possible, with hominins developing greater behavioral flexibility to compensate for their physical disadvantage. This might have included adjusting activity patterns to avoid peak Dinopithecus feeding times, developing more efficient foraging strategies, or utilizing tools to access food resources unavailable to even the powerful Dinopithecus. One intriguing possibility is that the presence of Dinopithecus may have accelerated hominin tool use and cooperation. When confronted with larger, more physically imposing competitors, our ancestors, the extinction of Dinopithecus. It wasn't a sudden collapse, but a slow fading under press. I find myself thinking about that often, how even the most successful species can be vulnerable. I imagine early hominins, perhaps benefiting from the mere presence of a Dinopithecus troop nearby. Predators might have thought twice before attacking, seeing those large, aggressive males. Conversely, a small group of hominins might have inadvertently drawn predators, endangering the Dinopithecus as well. Then, around 1.8 to 1.6 million years ago, Dinopithecus vanished. Climate change likely played a significant role, with grasslands expanding and woodlands shrinking, disrupting their food and shelter. Smaller, more adaptable baboons may have outcompeted them, especially as environments began to favor generalists. The rise of Homo erectus added new layers of challenge. More advanced tools, broader diets, and overlapping ecological needs likely intensified the competition for resources. Predation dynamics shifted too. Emerging carnivores increase the risks, especially for the young, and though it's harder to confirm, disease could have played a part. Socially cohesive species are often vulnerable to outbreaks. The very traits that made Dinopithecus successful, large size, slow reproduction, dietary specialization, may have ultimately led to its downfall. Thinking about apex predators, the dire wolf comes to mind. Known in ancient Greece as Inoxion dirus, the terrible wolf, a creature so dominant and ferocious that even mammoths feared it, with jaws that could tear through flesh and bone. These dire wolves, apex predators of their time, were meat-eaters with impressive hunting skills. Their teeth had distinct features, and their digestive systems were tailored for processing meat, with short intestines optimized for a carnivorous diet. Their robust skeletons, powerful limbs, and broad chests hint at their strength, and their bite force, among the strongest of any canine, enabling them to take down formidable prey. They prowled across diverse landscapes, from the plains of North America to the arid savannas of South America and the steppes of Eastern Asia. In North America, they hunted bison, Pleistocene horses, and large ground sloths. In South America, they feasted on ground sloths, glyptodons, toxodons, mastodons, and extinct camels. And in Eastern Asia, they faced formidable opponents like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, steppe bison, and wild horses. They faced fierce competition from other predators like Xenocyon, Smilodon, the American lion, and the giant short-faced bear. At La Brea, they clashed with predators and scavengers amidst trapped herbivores, outnumbering gray wolves 5 to 1. Living in monogamous pairs and hunting in packs, they displayed fierce determination and adaptability. Their hunting strategies, tooth breakage rates, and pack dynamics reveal so much about their evolutionary prowess. The origin of the dire wolf has been a subject of debate. One theory suggests that an expansion of the genus Canis from Eurasia gave rise to the dire wolf. Another proposes that the dire wolf emerged from an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, distinct from the genus Canis. In 1992, scientists tried to extract mitochondrial DNA from dire wolf remains, but tar residue from the La Brea pits thwarted their efforts. It wasn't until 2021 that scientists finally got their hands on nuclear DNA from 5 dire wolf fossils. These discoveries revealed that dire wolves represent a unique genetic lineage that split from wolf-like canines around 5.7 million years ago. This supports the theory of an ancestral lineage native to the Americas. Comparing dire wolves and gray wolves, despite similarities in their skeletons, they are not closely related. This is attributed to convergent evolution, where different species develop similar traits independently. Dire wolf fossils have been found in diverse habitats, from plains and grasslands to forested mountain areas and arid savannas. When I think about it, their story spans an impressive 40 million years. Imagine that. 40 million years. It started with the arrival of the canid family in North America, branching out from fox-like vulpini to dog-like canini. Each branch tells a story of intriguing variations. The most fossil-abundant areas for these creatures are the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles and the Tula Springs in Nevada. While dire wolf remains are less common at higher latitudes in North America, recent discoveries of Asian dire wolf fossils actually challenge previous theories about their range restrictions. Fossils have been reported in various states in the United States, with major sites located east of the Rocky Mountains. Dire wolf fossils have also been uncovered in various locations across Mexico, particularly in the San Jose Cave and El Cedazo. They've even been found in South America, with specimens dated to less than 17,000 years ago, in countries including Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Ecuador. The discovery of a dire wolf fossil in northeastern China in 2020 suggests a migration route from mid-latitude North America across Beringia into Eurasia. It really challenges previous assumptions about what might have limited their dispersal. When we understand the physical characteristics of dire wolves, it sheds light on their remarkable adaptations and behaviors. The dire wolf, similar in proportions to modern North American wolves like the Yukon wolf and northwestern wolf, exhibited variations in size and morphology. While some dire wolf specimens from Rancho La Brea were smaller than the largest northern wolves today, others were larger. The dire wolf had smaller feet and a larger head compared to modern wolves of similar body size, with a massive skull characterized by broader dimensions and a higher sagittal crest. Geographic differences in dire wolves were observed, with specimens from California and Mexico showing distinct craniodental features and limb proportions compared to those from east of the Continental Divide. Interestingly, Ischiro-Scion had shorter and lighter limbs, making it less adapted for running than timber wolves and coyotes, while Anoxius possessed longer limbs comparable to the Yukon wolf. Roughly 125,000 years ago, dire wolves roamed the earth when the sea level was 8 meters higher than today, in the Sangamonian interglacial period. The Wisconsin glacial period followed, lasting from 80,000 to 20,000 years ago, also known as the Ice Age, with glaciers covering much of North America. Dire wolves went extinct 9,500 years ago, marking the end of a unique era. Research indicates that dire wolves evolved separately from modern North American gray wolves and coyotes, without genetic mixing. The reasons for their extinction remain debated, likely involving factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability. The disappearance of dire wolves marked the end of a unique lineage within the Canidae family and potentially altered predator-prey dynamics at the time. Between 125,000 years ago and 9,500 years ago, Significant climatic shifts occurred, shaping the environment in which dire wolves lived. These changes, alongside fluctuations in prey populations, likely influenced the dire wolves' survival. Dire wolves existed in diverse habitats ranging from grasslands to forests, adapting to various environmental conditions. As apex predators, they played a crucial role in regulating ecosystems, impacting the populations of herbivores and smaller predators. Their extinction represented a loss of biodiversity and disrupted ecological balances established over millennia. While interbreeding is known among wolf-like canines, studies have found no evidence of genetic mixing between dire wolves and extant North American gray wolves or coyotes, suggesting independent evolution. The exact reasons for dire wolf extinction remain a subject of debate, with factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability likely playing a role. Reflecting on the era of the dire wolf, its formidable presence and powerful bite force captivate our imagination. In the grand tapestry of Earth's history, few chapters are as captivating as the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. These magnificent creatures dominated our planet for over 160 million years, shaping ecosystems and adapting into a myriad of forms that continue to captivate our imagination. But as the curtain fell on the age of reptiles, it gave way to an unexpected sequel, one where the supporting characters stepped into the spotlight and nearly stole the show. Enter the forest wrasses, more commonly known as the terror birds. These feathered nightmares emerged from the ashes of the dinosaur extinction, carrying the torch of their terrifying predecessors and proving that nature abhors a vacuum, especially when it comes to apex predators. Roughly 53 million years ago, in the early Eocene, the world was a very different place. A hothouse Earth with lush forests stretching from pole to pole, filled with a diverse range of life forms that emerged after the extinction of the dinosaurs. It was in this steamy prehistoric paradise that the first terror bird, Paleopsilopterus, made its debut. Standing at a modest height of 1 meter or 3 feet, this Brazilian bird might not have seemed particularly terrifying at first glance. In fact, it was about the same size as a modern-day stork. Hardly the stuff of nightmares, but appearances can be deceiving, and Paleopsilopterus had something its contemporaries lacked: potential. What set Paleopsilopterus apart was its agility and speed, traits that would become hallmarks of its descendants. While it may not have been the apex predator of its time, dwarfed by monstrous crocodilians and giant snakes, it was a harbinger of things to come. Little did the other inhabitants of ancient South America know what was in store. I sometimes imagine the shock those early mammals in Europe must have felt. Picture this exotic predator suddenly appearing, bringing a taste of South American terror to the Old World. It's all thanks to Eleutherornis, a terror bird that wasn't content with staying put. Fossil remains of this globe-trotting terror have been found in both France and Switzerland. It's the only known member of its family to have lived outside the Americas. As the epochs rolled by, the terror birds seemed to be engaged in a relentless competition with themselves, each new species trying to outdo its predecessors in size and ferocity. It was as if nature knew they were witnessing the birth of a dynasty that would reign for millions of years. As the Eocene progressed, so did the terror birds. The Oligocene epoch, from about 34 to 23 million years ago, marked a turning point. It was during this time that the family truly began to live up to its name. Giants emerged that would have given pause to even the bravest of prey. Take Paraphosonus, for example. This Brazilian bird was an absolute behemoth, standing 1.4 meters or about 4.5 feet tall. It tipped the scales at a whopping 180 kilograms or 400 pounds. To put that into perspective, Paraphosonus outweighed the largest living bird today, the ostrich. This was no lightweight contender. Paraphosonus was built like a feathered tank, with robust bones that spoke of raw power. Paleontologists believe that Paraphosonus hunted using a combination of kicks, slashes, and powerful jabs with its sharp beak. It's a hunting style that might remind one of a prehistoric version of mixed martial arts. But Paraphosonus wasn't just a mindless brute. Like many of its terror bird kin, it likely possessed a level of intelligence that set it apart from other contemporary predators. Studies of terror bird brain cases suggest that they had well-developed visual and auditory centers. This indicates keen senses that would have made them formidable hunters. As impressive as Paraphosonus was, it was merely setting the stage for what was to come. As we step into the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, spanning from about 23 to 2.5 million years ago, we encounter the true giants of the terror bird family. These were creatures that pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be a bird, reaching sizes that rivaled the predatory dinosaurs of old. Three names stand out in this pantheon of avian terrors: Titanus, Kelenken, and Brontornis. Each of these genera represents the pinnacle of the terror bird lineage, and each had its own claim to fame. Titanus, the youngest and smallest of the trio, was also the most adventurous. While most terror birds were content to dominate South America, Titanus had grander ambitions. It crossed the newly formed land bridge connecting North and South America during the Great American Interchange, becoming the only large South American predator to successfully establish itself in North America. Unlike most of its relatives, this bird lived in what is now the United States, including the states of Texas, Florida, and California. Standing 2 meters or about 6.5 feet tall, Titanus would have been an imposing sight for the mammals of North America. Imagine the shock of a Pleistocene horse or ground sloth, accustomed to watching out for saber-toothed cats and dire wolves, suddenly confronted by this alien predator. Half bird, half nightmare. But as impressive as Titanus was, it was dwarfed by its cousins back in South America. Kelenken, named after a mythological Tehuelche spirit, stood a towering 3 meters, or about 9.8 feet tall, and weighed around 250 kilograms, or 550 pounds. This was a bird the size of a grizzly bear, with a head larger than that of a horse and a beak that could crush bone. Speaking of its head, recent studies have shown that Kelenken and other large terror birds possessed a unique skull structure that set them apart from their smaller relatives. Known as the terror bird skull type, this adaptation gave them increased bite force and pecking power. This suggests that these giants may have been capable of taking down larger prey than previously thought, potentially including some of the megafauna that roamed South America during their reign. But the title of the largest terror bird is still hotly debated, with Brontornis giving Kellinkin a run for its money, while slightly shorter at 2.8 meters or 9.2 feet, Brontornis was built like a feathered bulldozer, potentially weighing up to 400 kilograms or 880 pounds. This made it not just the heaviest terror bird, but also the heaviest carnivorous bird of all time and the fourth heaviest bird overall. Interestingly, Brontornis has been the subject of scientific controversy. Some paleontologists have questioned whether it was truly a terror bird or even a carnivore at all, citing similarities in its toe claws to those of herbivorous birds. However, recent studies have identified features in Brontornis's vertebrae that are unique to terror birds, lending weight to its classification as a member of this fearsome family. Whether Brontornis was a terror bird or not, its massive size would have made it a force to be reckoned with. Its weight likely made it slower than its more nimble cousins, but what it lacked in speed, it made up for in raw power. I can only imagine Brontornis as the tank of the terror bird world. Terror birds. The name alone conjures an image of a prehistoric nightmare, a feathered predator capable of steamrolling over anything in its path. But their true power wasn't just in size. I've come to realize that speed was just as crucial to their success. Studies of terror bird leg bones reveal a structure remarkably similar to that of modern-day ostriches. Short thigh bones paired with elongated lower leg and foot bones, this adaptation clearly indicates high-speed running ability. Paleontologists estimate that many terror birds, including some of the larger species like Titanus, could have reached speeds exceeding 30 km/h, making them faster than Usain Bolt, while standing twice as tall and weighing several times as much. But speed wasn't just about chasing down prey. For many terror birds, especially the smaller and medium-sized species, it was also a crucial defensive adaptation. In a world filled with other large predators, including giant carnivorous mammals and enormous crocodilians, the ability to make a quick getaway could mean the difference between life and death. This combination of speed and size made terror birds versatile predators, capable of adapting to a variety of hunting strategies. Smaller, faster species might have specialized in chasing down swift prey like small mammals and reptiles, while the larger, more powerful species could have employed ambush tactics or even taken on larger, more dangerous quarry. While their imposing size and fearsome beaks often steal the spotlight, the true power of terror birds lay in their highly developed senses. Recent studies of terror bird skulls and brain cases have revealed that these prehistoric predators were equipped with sensory capabilities that put them leagues ahead of many of their contemporaries. While terror birds might not have had eyesight quite as sharp as modern raptors like eagles or hawks, they were far from being visually impaired. Their eyes were well developed and positioned to provide excellent depth perception, a crucial advantage for any predator. But what really set terror bird vision apart was its versatility. These birds were equally adept at seeing in bright daylight and in the dim light of dawn and dusk, making them effective hunters around the clock. As for their hearing, the inner ear structure of terror birds suggests an acute sensitivity to low-frequency sounds. This ability would have allowed them to detect the footsteps and movements of potential prey, even when hidden by dense vegetation. Imagine a terror bird standing motionless in the prehistoric forests of South America, its head cocked slightly to one side. To a casual observer, it might appear to be resting or even dozing, but in reality, every fiber of its being is alert, its incredibly sensitive ears picking up the faintest rustle of leaves or the softest patter of tiny feet. In an instant, it can pinpoint the location of its unsuspecting prey and launch into action. This combination of visual and auditory prowess made terror birds the complete predatory package. It's no wonder these birds were able to dominate their ecosystems for millions of years. But even the mightiest rulers faced their downfall, and the reign of the terror birds was no exception. For millions of years, these avian predators had ruled supreme in South America, developing into a diverse array of species that filled various ecological niches. But somewhere along the line, their luck ran out. Traditionally, the extinction of the terror birds was linked to the Great American Interchange, a major paleobiogeographic event that occurred about 2.7 million years ago. This event saw the formation of the Isthmus of Panama, creating a land bridge between North and South America. As a result, animals from both continents were able to migrate across this newly formed connection, leading to a significant reshuffling of fauna. The conventional wisdom held that the influx of new predators from North America, including cats, dogs, and bears, outcompeted the terror birds, leading to their eventual extinction. It was a neat and tidy explanation that seemed to make perfect sense. However, as is often the case in science, the truth has turned out to be more complex and nuanced. Recent studies have cast doubt on this simple competition-based extinction model, revealing a more intricate tapestry of factors that led to the terror bird's downfall. One of the primary challenges to the competition hypothesis comes from a closer examination of the fossil record. It turns out that most terror birds, along with many of their main South American competitors, had already disappeared long before placental predators arrived in South America in significant numbers. This timing mismatch suggests that something else was at play. Moreover, the success of Titanus in North America serves as a counterpoint to the idea that terror birds couldn't compete with placental mammals. Not only did Titanus successfully expand its range northward during the interchange, but it also managed to coexist with large canids and felines for millions of years. Clearly, at least some terror birds were more than capable of holding their own against mammalian predators. So, if competition alone didn't doom the terror birds, what did? The answer, as is often the case in paleontology, likely involves a complex interplay of factors. Climate change, in particular, may have played a significant role. From the Oligocene to the Pliocene, Earth's climate was on a long-term cooling trend, culminating in a series of ice ages. This global cooling would have had a profound impact on the ecosystems that terror birds called home. As temperatures dropped and habitats changed, the lush forests that many terror bird species relied on would have given way to more open environments. The idea that terror birds survived almost to the cusp of human arrival in South America, it's something that stayed with me. Imagine our ancestors hearing stories of these feathered giants passed down through generations. It's not entirely far-fetched. The terror birds, it seems, were remarkably resilient. For years, I'd read that they went extinct around 1 million years ago, but new fossil evidence has dramatically altered that timeline. Some smaller species, I've learned, have been dated to as recently as 96,000 years ago. A mere blink of an eye, geologically speaking. Even more tantalizing is the discovery of fossils, attributed to an unidentified terror bird species, in a formation dated to just 18,000 years ago. If confirmed, that would mean they survived almost to the cusp of human arrival in South America, which occurred around 15,000 years ago. It raises so many questions. How close did humans come to encountering them? What would such an encounter have been like? Could there be any truth to the legends of giant birds that persist in the folklore of some South American cultures? It's unlikely that humans directly interacted with them, but the possibility that our ancestors heard stories passed down is intriguing. After all, other megafauna that coexisted with early humans, woolly mammoths and giant ground sloths, for example, left lasting impressions on human culture and mythology. This near miss between humans and terror birds is also a reminder of the incredible diversity of life that has existed on our planet. It's sobering to think that if they had managed to hang on for just a few thousand years longer, our understanding of the natural world might be very different today. But of course, the terror birds weren't the only apex predators to ever walk the earth. Consider, if you will, the Tyrannosaurus rex. In the thick forests of the past, it was the top predator, striking terror into any animal that encountered it. With its seismic movements and razor-sharp teeth, this dinosaur has always been regarded as the pinnacle of prehistoric might. Even today, its reputation endures as the most frightening being to have ever walked the planet. So, just how terrifying was the T-Rex, actually? The first known fragment of a dinosaur skeleton was discovered in 1902 in Montana, United States, by Barnum Brown, a paleontologist. That discovery, I believe, marked the beginning of a new era in dinosaur research, sparking interest among many people in learning more about them. Since then, major finds have offered invaluable information on the morphology, behavior, and scientific significance of Tyrannosaurus rex, particularly the virtually complete specimen Sioux, discovered in South Dakota. Researchers have pieced together the history of this giant predator and its function as a prominent apex predator all over the late Cretaceous period through thorough excavation, evaluation, and reconstruction. T-Rex and other large theropod dinosaurs like Tarbosaurus and Daspeltosaurus are classified as members of the subfamily Tyrannosaurini within the family Tyrannosauridae. One of the last and most widely recognized tyrannosaurid species, Tyrannosaurus rex, represents the top predators of the late Cretaceous era and is a key figure in the evolution of dinosaurs. Stretching to an insane length, T-Rex boasted a muscular body that could extend up to 12 meters, a distance rivaling the size of a typical school bus from the tip of its formidable snout to the end of its tail. If rumors of paleontological speculation hold true, it's possible that certain specimens exceeded the monumental length of 13 meters, dwarfing any contemporary terrestrial predator. Yet, T-Rex's magnificence extended beyond its size alone. This imposing giant rose to a height of 6 meters at the hips. Imagine this, an enormously tall creature with two powerful legs bearing the weight of its massive frame, its head lifted high as it surveyed its realm with a regal authority. Having acknowledged their immense size, the next big question that comes to mind is how heavy these remarkable creatures were. Estimates suggest that a T-Rex could weigh anywhere from 12 to 18 tons with its skin and flesh covering its massive bones. To put that into perspective, it's similar to the weight of several small cars compressed into the form of one awe-inspiring predator. A true testament to the sheer power and bulk of this ancient apex predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex boasted a sturdy skeletal structure with a distinct vertebral column comprised of neck, back, and sacral vertebrae. Though the exact number of tail vertebrae varied, its neck formed a muscular S-shaped curve supporting its massive head, while pneumatic depressions and robust neural spines provided strength and flexibility. The forelimbs were short with two clawed fingers, contrasting the long hind limbs, contributing to its imposing stature. The pelvis featured a lengthy ilium and a large pubic boot, while the hind foot had an arctometatarsallian metatarsus. Throughout its skeleton, many bones were hollowed, reducing weight without sacrificing strength, which is crucial for supporting its bulk. The Tyrannosaurus rex, renowned for its massive size and impressive strength, possessed skulls reaching up to 1.54 meters in length. That's about the size of an adult human. These skulls, the skulls of Tyrannosaurus rex, were truly something to behold. Large fenestrae reduced their weight, and unique adaptations like an extremely wide rear and narrow snout gave them exceptional binocular vision. These skulls, composed of massive yet fused and pneumatized bones, were a key factor in the Tyrannosaurid's powerful bite, far surpassing that of other non-Tyrannosaurid dinosaurs. The upper jaw's U-shaped tip allowed for the extraction of more tissue and bone with each bite, though I imagine this put a great deal of stress on the front teeth. And what teeth they were! The teeth in the upper jaw had prominent ridges and tips that curled backward almost like cutting tools. It's fascinating to see this kind of heterodonty in action. The remaining teeth, robust and spaced, resembled, well, lethal bananas. In mature individuals, the upper jaw actually housed larger teeth than the lower jaw, with the largest tooth discovered measuring a staggering 30.5 centimeters in length. Numerous small openings observed in both the upper and lower jaws suggest potential sensory functions, or perhaps even indications of external structures. Despite the T-Rex's reputation for its massive jaws and teeth, I find myself often pondering its disproportionately small arms. For a long time, the assumption was that they were useless remnants. But some now speculate that these small arms were, in fact, deadly weapons used in hand-to-hand combat. Paleontologist Stephen Stanley suggests they were lethal weapons, and I find his theory compelling. Imagine this: limbs only about 3 feet long, but tipped with crescent-shaped claws sharpened to a razor edge. Claws capable of causing deadly injuries to unsuspecting prey. Picture the T-Rex advancing, huge head hanging above, while those strong front limbs made rapid slashing movements, cutting through tissue and muscle with frightening accuracy. This paints a very different picture of how the T-Rex hunted, showing a creature skilled in quickly and effectively immobilizing its prey. What were once thought of as useless structures like wisdom teeth in humans or wings in flightless birds may have actually been crucial weapons in its hunting tactics, adding another layer to the fear this prehistoric predator inspired. And what about the T-Rex's eyesight? The Jurassic Park movies often portray it as having poor vision, easily fooled by stillness. But recent scientific findings suggest otherwise. Paleontologists, drawing upon comparative anatomy and fossil evidence, theorize that the T-Rex likely had vision akin to contemporary predators like hawks, with the ability to detect both moving and stationary objects. This challenges its cinematic depiction, certainly, and deepens our understanding of its sensory capabilities. Of course, another perspective suggests the T-Rex was an adept ambush predator, utilizing its size, powerful jaws, and heightened senses to swiftly hunt prey. Conversely, some view it as a scavenger, feeding on carrion or scavenging from carcasses. These differing views, I think, underscore the complexity of the T-Rex's behavior and ecological role, fueling ongoing debates among researchers. Along with its extraordinary eyesight, the Tyrannosaurus rex possessed a remarkable sense of smell, akin to vultures today. This keen olfactory ability allowed it to spot objects up to 6 kilometers away under ideal conditions. In addition to its sharp senses, the T-Rex excelled at hunting due to its quick speed. Able to detect prey from a distance, it could pursue its targets at speeds reaching 25 miles per hour, a pace comparable to the world record sprinting speed of Usain Bolt. Imagine yourself wandering in a primeval environment, trying to navigate back to safety with the noises of the woods echoing in the background. Suddenly, a tremendous noise halts you in your tracks. The Tyrannosaurus rex is approaching, causing your heart to race. Desperately trying to escape the advancing creature, you sprint frantically, your feet pounding on the forest floor. Yet, you feel the earth tremble under your feet as the T-Rex closes in. Glancing back, you see its massive silhouette with gleaming sharp teeth under the sun's rays. Realizing to no escape, the T-Rex's jaws close on you with incredible force. 50 to 60 teeth, each as big as a banana, pierce your skin simultaneously, sending waves of agony through your body. In that horrifying moment, you experience the true terror of being hunted by the most formidable predator to ever roam the earth. The feeding and diet of the Tyrannosaurus rex were integral to its dominance as a top predator during the late Cretaceous period. With its massive size and powerful jaws filled with serrated teeth, the T-Rex was a formidable carnivore. Its diet primarily consisted of large herbivorous dinosaurs such as Triceratops and Ankylosaurus, which were among the toughest dinosaurs of their time and were preyed upon by T-Rex. Additionally, at times, T-Rex would also prey upon other large carnivorous dinosaurs, showcasing its fearsome predatory prowess. For example, it's believed that T-Rex may have occasionally targeted individuals of its own kind, or even formidable predators, demonstrating the sheer dominance and terror of this apex predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex had a significant impact on its surroundings beyond its role as an efficient hunter. Its presence necessitated changes in the behavior of other animals. Some dinosaurs developed defenses such as speed or armor to evade its attacks, while others sought refuge in dense forests or migrated to new areas. As the dominant predator, T-Rex reshaped prey distribution and population dynamics, influencing ecological balance and predator-prey relationships. The Tyrannosaurus rex shared its environment with a diverse array of other dinosaurs, each possessing unique adaptations and behaviors. Among these were Edmontosaurus, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Torosaurus, Albertosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Denversaurus, Ornithomimus, and Anzu. Forget the horned helmets and storm-tossed seas that we often associate with Vikings. I've been reading accounts of something far more terrifying that they faced, colossal, powerful creatures almost ripped from legend. These weren't just animals, they were giants of a dying world, beasts that could crush ships and skewer warriors in an instant. Armed with iron blades and wooden shields, the Vikings didn't just conquer lands, they battled nature itself, in clashes so intense they became legends whispered for centuries. The first beast our Norse ancestors regularly encountered was the magnificent aurochs, wild cattle unlike anything alive today. I picture them, standing at a towering 6 feet at the shoulder. These weren't your typical farm animals. A full-grown aurochs bull could weigh over 2,200 pounds, with a muscular frame that dwarfed even the largest modern cattle breeds. What truly made them intimidating were their enormous horns. I imagined them as curved weapons that could span over 3 feet from tip to tip. These weren't defensive tools. They were perfectly designed killing instruments. The forward-facing orientation allowed bulls to charge directly at threats with enough force to impale a fully armored warrior or even flip a small boat. Archaeological evidence suggests that aurochs' horns were often kept as trophies after successful hunts, becoming drinking vessels for the most prestigious Viking warriors. The relationship between Vikings and aurochs was more than just survival. It was woven into their very culture, leaving a mark on Norse art, symbolism, and even the warrior mindset. Hunting these beasts was a true test of courage for young Norse warriors. Unlike modern hunting, where distance and firearms provide safety, Viking hunters had to approach within spear-throwing range, close enough to smell the animal's breath. A charging aurochs could reach speeds of 22 miles per hour, leaving hunters with mere seconds to make their throw or face the consequences. Many Norse graves contain evidence of horn wounds, silent testimony to hunts gone wrong. By the Viking Age, aurochs populations were already declining across Europe due to habitat loss and hunting preyers. The last known aurochs died in 1627 in Poland's Jaktorów forest, long after the Viking era had ended. But the land wasn't the only domain where Vikings encountered magnificent creatures that have since vanished. The seas that formed their highways held their own vanished giants. If you sailed with Vikings across the North Atlantic, you would have witnessed an extraordinary sight along rocky coastlines. Colonies of thousands of black and white birds standing upright like tiny sentinels. The great auk, often called the original penguin, bore a striking resemblance to its southern hemisphere counterparts, despite having no direct relation. Standing about 2.5 to 2.8 feet tall, these flightless birds were perfectly adapted to the cold waters of the North Atlantic. Their wings had transformed into powerful flippers that propelled them through the ocean with remarkable speed. Measurements based on similar birds suggest they could fly underwater at up to 22 miles per hour. On land, however, they were awkwardly vulnerable, waddling upright on 2 legs, unable to take flight when danger approached. For Vikings, The great auk represented an almost absurdly convenient resource. Unlike most prey that required chasing, these birds couldn't flee effectively on land. Norse seafarers could simply walk among nesting colonies and select their victims. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands reveals vast quantities of great auk bones in kitchen middens, often showing cut marks consistent with meat removal. The great auk's waterproof feathers were prized for insulation and bedding. Its fat provided lamp oil, and its beaks became decorative items. A Viking burial in Norway even featured a necklace with 5 great auk beaks, hinting at both symbolic and practical value. Ironically, the bird's marine adaptations made it vulnerable, breeding only on a few remote islands, laying a single egg on rocky ground. By the Viking Age, human hunting had already forced some colonies to vanish. The great auk's final extinction didn't occur until 1844, when the last confirmed pair was killed on the island of Elde, off Iceland. A sad epilogue to a relationship that began when the first Norse ships reached their breeding grounds. The birds that had once numbered in the millions, forming colonies so vast they darkened shorelines, vanished because they had no natural defense against human predation. While Vikings ventured across vast oceans, the forests that surrounded their settlements held creatures just as remarkable and far more dangerous. Among these was a distinct forest giant that many researchers now believe represented a specialized hybrid population, the European forest elk, or skogaelgur in Old Norse, a creature that combined characteristics of what we now classify as separate moose and elk species. Standing up to 7 feet at the shoulder, with magnificent palmate antlers spanning up to 6 feet across, these forest giants were truly imposing. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals distinctive antler configurations, unlike modern European moose populations, suggesting these animals represented a unique genetic lineage that has since disappeared through hunting press and hybridization with other cervid populations. What made these forest elk particularly remarkable was their coloration and behavior. Unlike modern moose, with their uniformly dark coats, Viking-era dions. The Vikings faced dangers we can barely imagine today. Consider the forest elk, a creature so massive that a single animal could feed a small village for weeks during the harsh northern winters. I find it fascinating that these weren't the moose we know today, but a distinct population, marked by light patches on their sides, perfectly camouflaged for the dappled forest light. These forest elk were more aggressive than their modern relatives, with bulls fiercely defending their territories. For the Vikings, they were more than just food. Their hides were stronger than cattle leather, ideal for shields and clothing, and their antlers were transformed into tools, weapons, and even drinking horns for feasts. But even by the late Viking Age, signs of decline were appearing for the elk. Intensive hunting and forest clearing fragmented their habitat. Encounters became rare, turning these magnificent beasts into creatures of remote wilderness. However, the forests weren't the only place where Vikings faced formidable creatures. Deep within Scandinavia's icy rivers lurked another powerhouse, just as valuable and equally dangerous, the gray whale. Today, spotting a whale feels like a rare and wondrous sight, but for Viking sailors, it often meant a high-stakes battle. Gray whales were a valuable prize, offering meat, oil and bone, but hunting them was incredibly risky. A single thrash of the whale's tail could shatter a longship. Unlike most whale species that still inhabit northern seas, the Atlantic gray whale was driven to complete extinction by the 18th century. But during the Viking Age, these marine mammals were abundant, especially in coastal waters. They reached lengths of 14 to 15 meters, roughly the size of a Viking longship. Their mottled gray coloration, often covered with barnacles, made them easily recognizable. What made gray whales unique was their feeding strategy. They were bottom feeders, plowing the sea floor for invertebrates, creating massive mud plumes visible from the surface. This brought them into shallow coastal waters, where Viking ships operated. A single whale could yield up to 20 tons of meat and blubber, enough to feed an entire Viking settlement through the winter. Archaeological evidence shows specialized bone tools for processing whale meat and huge cooking pits used only for creatures of this size. But the hunting of gray whales was incredibly dangerous. Unlike passive species, gray whales were known for their aggressive defense. They would charge attacking boats, smashing them with their massive flukes. Norse sagas tell of whaling expeditions ending in disaster, earning them the nickname devilfish. Their predictable migration patterns and coastal breeding grounds made them vulnerable. Vikings knew their routes and set up ambush points in narrow passages. By the late Viking Age, gray whale populations were already declining, a result of increased whaling and the species' low reproductive rate. The struggles didn't end once the Vikings reached dry land. The forests of Britain held predators just as fierce and far less predictable. When Viking longships first landed on the shores of Britain and Ireland in the late 8th century, they entered territories ruled by another formidable predator, the British wolf. These wolves were genetically distinct from their Scandinavian cousins and had dominated the British Isles for thousands of years. They stood taller than the Honshu wolf, but smaller than modern timber wolves, typically reaching heights of 70 to 85 cm. Their thick, gray-brown coats were adapted to the damp conditions, with distinctive white markings often appearing on their chests. When Vikings first raided Lindisfarne in 793 CE, wolves remained common throughout Britain and Ireland. I've always been fascinated by how early cultures adapt to their environments, and the Vikings are no exception. Their relationship with the wolf is a perfect example, a blend of respect, fear, and ultimately, control. Imagine those first encounters in the forests of southern England. Archaeological digs from early Viking settlements in the Hebrides and Northern Isles have turned up wolf bones marked with cuts. This suggests the newcomers quickly started hunting these predators. For Vikings establishing permanent colonies in the British Isles, wolves were both a threat and an opportunity. Their attacks on livestock, particularly sheep, which were so important to the Norse economy in places like the Orkneys and Hebrides, made them natural enemies. Yet Viking warriors also respected the hunting skills and pack coordination of wolves, qualities they themselves valued in battle. This complex relationship shows up in Norse place names still found across former Viking territories in Britain. Places like Olvadale, Wolf Valley in Cumbria, and Wolf Hill in Perthshire mark areas where Norse settlers frequently encountered these predators. Several Viking-era runestones discovered in northern England show wolf hunts, which suggests these dangerous pursuits had ceremonial importance for warriors, proving their prowess in new lands. British wolves even left their mark on Viking folklore. As Norse settlers mixed with local populations, they adopted and changed Celtic wolf myths into their own traditions. The wolf-warrior connection grew stronger, with berserkers sometimes described wearing wolf pelts rather than bear skins. But the fate of British wolves wasn't sealed by the Vikings themselves, but by their descendants and successors. As Norse settlements grew into medieval kingdoms, systematic wolf extermination became policy. The process began during the Viking Age, but sped up afterward. The last wolves in England were wiped out during the 15th century, and Scotland's final wolves held on until the 17th century. Ireland's last wolf was reportedly killed in 1786, ending a predator line that had seen everything from the first Celtic settlers to the Viking invasions and beyond. Another animal the Vikings encountered seems like it was a relic from a more ancient age, the Atlantic and Baltic sturgeons. These armored leviathans lurked beneath the rivers and coastal waters of northern Europe. Living fossils, largely unchanged for over 200 million years, these sturgeons once dominated the waterways of Viking territories, but have since disappeared from much of their historical range. The Baltic sturgeon grew to massive sizes, with females reaching up to 3 meters, or 10 feet, in length and weighing over 300 kilograms, or 660 pounds. Their prehistoric look, with bony plates called scutes, arranged in 5 rows along their bodies instead of scales, made them unmistakable among European fish species. Most distinctive was their long, armored snout, with a vacuum-like mouth underneath, perfectly designed for sucking up mollusks and crustaceans from the river and sea floors. Their immense size made a single catch noteworthy enough to appear in regional sagas, with several Norse tales mentioning heroes who wrestled armored river dragons. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals specialized sturgeon spears with detachable heads designed to pierce the fish's armored exterior. This is a testament to how important these catches were to Viking fishermen. Beyond their meat, sturgeons offered multiple valuable resources. Their swim bladders were processed into isinglass, used for clarifying beer and wine and for making a strong adhesive. Their cartilaginous skeletons, when boiled, produced a gelatin used in Viking medicine for joint ailments. Most prized was sturgeon roe, or caviar, which became a delicacy reserved for jarls and kings. By the late Viking Age, sturgeon populations were already declining in heavily settled areas. Their slow reproduction, females mature at 15 to 20 years, made them vulnerable to overfishing. Predictable spawning runs and their habit of basking near the surface made them easy targets. In the medieval period, dams blocked spawning routes, and pollution worsened their situation. By the 18th century, Baltic sturgeon had grown so rare that Scandinavian monarchs claimed them as royal property, a protection that came too late to save them. But as Vikings turned their sights inland, the armored giants of the rivers gave way to shaggy titans of the forest, massive beasts that carved their own trails through the dense woodlands. The European bison and its forest-dwelling cousin, the wisent. Unlike the American bison we know today, these European relatives were specifically adapted to the dense mixed forests that once covered much of northern and eastern Europe. Standing up to 1.9 meters, or 6.2 feet, at the shoulder and weighing over 900 kilograms, or 2,000 pounds. The European bison was the heaviest land animal in Europe during the Viking Age. Bulls developed massive shoulder humps covered with shaggy, dark brown fur that contrasted with the lighter coat on their lower bodies. Their distinctive curved horns, though shorter than those of the aurochs, were equally dangerous when the animal charged. Unlike grassland bison, these woodland giants could navigate between trees with surprising agility, using their powerful bodies to create paths through the densest undergrowth. These natural trails, maintained over generations of use, became known to Vikings as bison roads, reliable routes through otherwise impenetrable forests that human travelers would follow. For Viking communities pushing into new territories, these massive herbivores represented both opportunity and challenge. A successful bison hunt could provide meat for an entire village for weeks, along with hides thick enough to stop arrows, making them prized material for shields and winter clothing. The distinctive hump contained concentrated fat reserves that produced high-quality oil for lamps and waterproofing. However, hunting these forest behemoths was extraordinarily dangerous. Unlike deer or smaller game, wounded bison would typically, the Viking sagas tell grim tales of entire hunting parties wiped out by enraged bulls. These weren't just any bulls, but the European bison, formidable creatures capable of charging at 40 kilometers an hour, even through dense woods. Their sheer size and power meant a single charge could be lethal to multiple hunters. It's a sobering thought that even as the Vikings sailed and settled, the world they knew was already disappearing. The bison, once a defining presence in their landscape, were slowly fading, victims of the same human expansion and climate shifts that powered the Viking Age itself. By the late Viking Age, their numbers were dwindling across much of their former range. Intensive hunting combined with the clearing of forests for agriculture pushed these magnificent animals into smaller and smaller, more isolated groups. Unlike the aurochs, though, the European bison narrowly avoided complete extinction. A small population clung to life in the Białowieża forest between Poland and Belarus. Today, around 7,000 descendants live there, a direct link to the forest giants the Vikings once hunted.